Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. It sounds like OP has a really interesting background. Not least putting up with working at a petrol station for 15 years. That deserves a medal. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Karen runs out of gas, blames the cashier, aka me, and expects me to pay for it. Okay, this is going back to 2003. I'm working a minimum wage job at a very busy gas station in the UK. I'd only been there a few months. That's outstanding considering the staff turnover for this place. I know the ropes of the place, and it's also, and still is, very busy. Lines of cars and trucks going down the highway and a line of customers going out the door, and I'm working alone as usual. Hundreds of customers with places to be. Cast. Me, the overworked 17-year-old with a bright future of PTSD and other mental health goodness. Next 15 years of bliss in this hellhole. Karen, crazy bee, missing her butler, but still has a 10-yard pole up her. Customers, everyone else. Karen got out of a taxi, came up to the front of the line, past 20 customers waiting patiently, age 70 plus. She's dressed head to toe in a black velvet, a fur coat, and wearing more platinum jewelry than I've ever seen. She also looked vaguely familiar. See at the end. She demands in a very snobby voice, "I need fuel." Imagine Professor McGonagall from Harry Potter, but fatter. Me, I'm sorry, but you'll have to wait your turn as I serve customers. Karen, I need fuel in my car collected from down the road. Me and a few customers give her a weird look. If you've broken down, I have the number for a recovery service and you can use our phone, and hand her a card with the number and the phone in between customers. She just looked at the card and phone as if I put dead rats on the counter. Why can't you do it? Me, I'm afraid to say I can't. It's very busy today while still serving customers. Karen, no, why can't you go retrieve my car? Me, wondering, WTF, we're a petrol station. We don't offer recovery services. Karen, nonsense. You will collect my car this instant. I'm getting annoyed by now, so are the other customers. She lets her car run out of fuel, leaves it on a now gridlocked highway, gets a taxi to my station, and somehow it's my fault and responsibility to rectify the situation? How? I can't close the station. I'm here on my own. I don't own a car or even have a license. I'll call the recovery company for you when I have a free minute. Just be aware that they'll charge a fee and need payment in cash. There's an ATM outside. She now gets red in the face. Are you stupid? Why should I pay? My car's run out of fuel. You have to deal with it. I'm trying to keep cool, serve customers, and finding an alternative to get her out the store at this point. In that case, there are fuel cans behind you that you can purchase and fill. Karen, very well. She picks up a 1-gallon can and slams it on the counter. Go fill it. I quickly say sorry to next customer and scan the can. That'll be £5 and another $3.50 to fill it. $8.50 altogether. Karen, I'm not paying for that. It's your responsibility to provide fuel, and your customer service is atrocious. I refuse to pay. You will pay for my recovery, my fuel, and my taxi. Me. Then you can leave. An entire line of customers start chewing her out too, telling her to get the F out. We're busy, and stupid old cow. Karen. You'll be hearing from me about this, and I'll have your job for this insolence. And she storms out and gets back into the taxi that was blocking my forecourt. We did hear back from her about a week later. She'd gone to customer complaints, reached the regional manager and the national HR, claiming that I was responsible for her car running out of fuel, that being abandoned on a highway, refusing to pay for towing and refueling, and being humiliated in front of other customers with demands of reimbursement and compensation for poor quality of service. Finally, a letter of apology written and signed by me with my letter of resignation. A week after this, the manager pulls me aside. She knew all about it. She heard the story from me and a few of our regular customers, as well as watched and heard it all on our security cameras. The Karen sounded crazy. It looked like she'd just come from a funeral. She chalked it up as being emotionally drained, senility, mental health, and said not to worry about it. She'd seen worse. Then she got the letters and phone calls from head office, and that threw her theory out the window. She handed me a copy of the response letter that was sent to Karen stating she was barred from all of our company stations nationwide, informed that the company is not a charity, and entering one of our stations or approaching our staff will result in removal by police. I read the name and realized she was my old principal from primary school. She was an old hellhound when I was 5. Looks like she just got worse as she got older. See you in hell, Karen. And our next story. HOA Banshee is terrorizing the neighborhood. I live in a small HOA of 220 single-family homes in northwest Colorado Springs, not far from the U.S. Air Force Academy, and our board is fully off the rails. At our annual meeting last October, the board was content to let the association manager, hired via a private company, lead the meeting, which quickly devolved into a disaster as she was presenting grossly overinflated charges to the community for supposedly state-mandated administrative tasks that aren't actually required of our community. That night, the board manipulated the ballots/proxies cast at the meeting and quite literally stole the election. They also tried to use these ballots to cast votes to double the association's annual dues. They're running completely unchecked. They've allowed/conducted no audits for years required in our governing documents, but those are only for them to hold over us, not the other way around. Anyway, late last year, the city mailed out postcards about a small daycare one of our neighbors was running out of their home. The HOA quite literally did not know it existed, both due to their own incompetence and due to the courteous nature with which the owner operates the childcare. But once the city sent notices, these people went on a full-blown attack that continues to this day. They started sending mass emails to the community telling them it was urgent to send letters of opposition to the city. They didn't ask us how we felt. They just tried to get people as worked up in opposition as possible. Colorado has a law that says HOAs can't prohibit childcare homes, full stop. And the city, which as of today requires a permit for someone running a childcare out of their home, updated the city's Unified Development Code to now just grant the use by right. In other words, she'll have the right to do this, period, without even needing a permit once that new ordinance kicks in on June 5th. The board knows this, and yet they've spent the last 6 months in our HOA dollars making this poor woman's life utter hell. One board member's become so obsessed, she literally sat outside the house in her car and followed these families out of the neighborhood to see where they live and insists this is just her doing her due diligence. She doesn't seem to think there's anything wrong with this and is openly telling people that she is, in my opinion, essentially stalking children. So the board, of course, appeals the permit for this childcare at the City Planning Commission meeting, pointing to all the letters they told their friends and neighbors to send. The city correctly denies their request and issues the permit. Then the board appeals the Planning Commission's decision to the City Council. The City Council correctly denies that appeal and upholds the permit. And even after all this, despite state law, despite city ordinances, and even after the city denied their appeals twice, the HOA is now issuing covenant violations for covenants void under state law. And then, icing on the cake, today they sent an email blast out to the entire community, naming those of us who spoke at City Council in support of the childcare, basically putting targets on our back and essentially deputizing the neighbors, charging them with the task of monitoring the childcare. The poor woman now is looking at paying hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in legal fees to stop their harassment and fight for her livelihood, for something she has every right to be doing. We live in a childcare desert, and our community needs this service. I can never have children of my own, and yet even I know this childcare is crucial to the health of our neighborhood. We're also anchored by an elementary school. This is not an issue of children being out of place or of the resulting noise or traffic, and the HOA is content to burn my annual dues on this harassment campaign. It's honestly disgusting. We went scorched earth on Nextdoor. I hate everything about that site, but it's a tool available to us in all of this, and connected with quite a few neighbors who are pissed as well. One of them was telling me about the harassment they've had to deal with, and I mentioned it's likely because the Covenant's director, the terrorist of the neighborhood, lives on her street. That was news to her, so she looked up the address, and it turns out the HOA Banshee doesn't own a house in our neighborhood. That's a requirement for being a board member. The house is still in the name of her deceased mother-in-law, who's been dead since freaking 2016. After double and triple checking property records, I immediately called the president of the board to tell him, and I was disappointed to find it wasn't news to him. It apparently came up back when she and another woman who'd also inherited her home were appointed, not elected, to the board. The association manager at the time caught it, and they both assured her it was just a paperwork thing and that it was going to be addressed. No one followed up, because of course they didn't, and everyone assumed it was done. The president on the board then goes on to tell me that he thinks they probably haven't updated it for tax reasons, so not only is this woman on the board when she knows she cannot be, but there are implications that she and her husband are possibly committing tax fraud, and it's just so typical of people like this. Like, of course this woman would be all rules for thee and not for me. Of course she would be harassing people about governing documents she herself is knowingly violating. She spent the last 6 months claiming one of our neighbors is violating various HOA, city, and state rules for running a home childcare, which is a lie. Our neighbor is fully licensed and permitted and in good standing with all the regulatory agencies involved, all while actually being the one violating the rules and law herself. And if the HOA had followed up on this issue, she wouldn't have been on the board, and all of her harassment of the owner of the childcare could have been prevented. That's the saddest and most frustrating part. Anyway, the president of the board knows I'm not letting this go, and that I will absolutely be holding him accountable to do the right thing. And he told me yesterday he'll be telling her she can no longer serve on the board. It's the most satisfying example of the informal definition of karma I've ever seen. By needlessly harassing her neighbors and community, she's basically rained hell down on herself. Meanwhile, I seem to have the ear of the president of the board, who I suspect can sense the tides are changing, and who's been open to the idea of appointing new, fresh perspectives to the board and working together to implement change for the better. I personally never would have gone to battle for all this had the existing board members not behaved how they did, and all I can think of is Oleana Tyrell's last scene in GOT. I want her to know it was me. Edit. Change the language about the tax stuff just a little since it's all secondhand information at the moment. Edit 2. The board president informed us that the Banshee has been dismissed from her position. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.